Hey, fellow writers, it's Mrs. Linderman. We're going to talk about dialogue in our stories today, our realistic fiction stories. And you might be wondering, what is dialogue? You probably have heard that word before, but it just means that when an author shares the exact words a character speaks in a story, what they say, it's called dialogue, right? You notice there are those talking marks we sometimes say, the quotation marks around what somebody actually says. So we're going to learn a little bit more today. We're going to do kind of two parts to this lesson. We're going to learn like how to add dialogue, and then we're going to learn how to punctuate the dialogue. And you're going to be doing that in your writer's notebook today. You're going to be adding some dialogue, and you're going to be working on your draft, your sloppy copy. You're also going to have some charts to copy down into your writer's notebook at the end of the day today and turn those in. All right, so let's think about adding dialogue, right? Dialogue really helps the reader better understand the story, and it helps them to feel like they were part of the story, like they're there. So when you create and add dialogue into your story, it's important for you to do it in a way that shows some action or it shows part of the setting along with the dialogue, what they're saying. It's not just back and forth. He said, she said, he said, she said, right? That's pretty boring. Second graders might do that, but third graders, almost fourth graders, definitely do not write like that in their stories. So today, at this first part of the lesson, I'm going to show you how to kind of weave, if you will, the dialogue and some action and possibly the setting, kind of weaving those things together to create a scene for your reader. You really want them to be visualizing as they're reading your story. You want them to be able to see things and to hear things in your story, but they're going to have to do it with their mind, right? You do that when you read, and you want your readers to do that when they read your story. So let's look at what not to do. This is an example of dialogue between two characters, and it's just back and forth. Okay, look inside the red box and let's read together. Pam, what are we going to do today? Asked Tony. I don't know. I sure am bored. We could play checkers, said Pam. Not again. I think we should do something else, exclaimed Tony. So I have a couple pictures right there of tennis, because when people just put all dialogue in their stories, it reminds me of a tennis game or a ping pong game, right? It's back and forth, and it's not very interesting or exciting. So we're going to look on the next slide how to take those same exact quotations, what people are saying, their dialogue, and how we can add some action, how we can add some setting into our story. Okay? These aren't bad things to say that the characters are speaking. We just want to make sure that we let our reader in on some secrets that are happening around. What's going on around these characters while they're having their conversation. So let's take a look at the next slide. And we're going to add in, like I said, some action and maybe some of the setting as well. All right, so let's take a peek. You'll notice that in red is what was just on the previous slide. Okay, and everything else that's in black was added. So it enhances, it makes it a little bit better. So let's read together. It says, Pam, what are we going to do today? Asked Tony, as they sat on the hard cement step of the front porch. Both kids were tapping their feet on the concrete, trying not to kick each other. Okay, can you hear what that might sound like, tapping their feet? Can you see what that might look like in your mind? People trying not to kick each other. You know that they must be sitting kind of close to one another. They're sitting on a hard cement step on the porch, so you kind of know where they are and what it's like. I don't know. I sure am bored. We could play checkers, said Pam. As she turned her face to the sun, she leaned into Tony to draw his attention ahead. The kids giggled as a stranger walked past the house with a basket of flowers for Pam's elderly neighbor. So not just what was said in red, right? But now we know that it's sunny out. Pam's turning her face toward the sun, and she leans over to Tony. Maybe she's kind of poking him with her elbow, right? And kind of shrugging her head like to, hey, look, someone's coming down the street, right? We know that Pam must live in a neighborhood. She's got a neighbor that's an elderly neighbor that someone's dropping off some flowers. So we can kind of picture maybe where they are in a town. Not again. I think we should do something else, exclaimed Tony. He smiled as he thought about the new friend he had made and the adventures he was dreaming they would conquer together. So now we know a little bit more about how Tony's feeling. Looks like maybe he's new in the neighborhood, right? He's got a new friend. So Pam is his new friend. And he's thinking of all the things that they could do together and how much fun it's going to be to get to know this new friend. So doesn't that sound a lot better than just what was written in red on the previous slide, right? It was just kind of back and forth. This shows us a little bit more about what's happening, and we can kind of feel like we're there as the reader. We know what's happening and we're kind of visualizing and we're putting ourselves into the story. Okay, so that's kind of part one of our lesson today, is adding that dialogue, but also kind of showing where the characters are or what they're doing, things that are happening around them. Now, you don't want to add too much dialogue in your story, right? Your story shouldn't be only people talking, right? You want to set the scene. You want to talk about details, what's happening. So it's not all conversation, not all dialogue. So you want to make sure that you don't add too much, but you want to certainly add enough. So that's part one of our lesson. Here's part two. When I write dialogue, how do I do that? Right? What do I even do? Okay, if you don't punctuate it, here's what it looks like in bold. Okay, this doesn't have any quotation marks, doesn't have any commas, any periods. It just says, well, it has a period at the end. It just says, cats make me sneeze, she informed us. And that doesn't sound right to me, right? If somebody is talking, we need to know who's talking and how they're talking, maybe, and what they're actually saying. That to me doesn't look like anybody's talking because, first of all, it's missing those quotation marks. So on the next couple of slides, we're going to look at how you can properly punctuate some dialogue so that your reader knows who's speaking and possibly how they're speaking. All right, and it will make a little bit more sense when we look at these examples. There are two ways that you can punctuate your dialogue. Okay, there are things called tags. And the tag is telling you who said whatever it is and how they said it. So you can put the tag at the end of what they say, or you can put the tag at the beginning of what they say. And I want you to try to do both in your story. So here are some examples of how you put the tag at the end. I've got every sentence starts with quotation marks. You can see that right up in here. Okay, I'm going to turn on my mouse so you can see that. Here is the quotation marks. Oh, it didn't work. Let me try it again. Right up in here. There we go. At the beginning and at the end of what somebody is saying. Okay, there's also punctuation after they speak. And I'll explain that in just a second as well. All right. So a tag at the end. Here's some examples. I baked some cookies, said Mom. Said Mom is the tag. I love when you bake cookies, I exclaimed. I exclaimed is in bold, and that's the tag. Can I have 2 cookies? I begged. I begged is the tag. Okay, so what's in bold is the tag, and I put that at the end of what the character is saying. Now you'll notice that around what they're saying are those quotation marks. Okay, and right after the last word, there's punctuation. So this very first one right here, there's a comma because all that's happening is that character is just making a statement. So right there, they're just saying something, but we don't put a period there. We put a comma instead when there's conversation, when there's dialogue. Okay, so you're going to have to train your brain a little bit differently when we're doing dialogue, that at the end of a sentence, instead of a period, we're going to have a comma because then we need to add the tag on there. Now, if you have question mark or exclamation point, then you put that there, right? That is there like it normally would be, nothing else. Okay, and then you add your tag. The quotation marks go on the outside of the punctuation. So make sure that, because the way they're punctuating their sentence is part of what they're saying, right? If they're asking a question, we can hear that, and we need to know that they're asking a question. So that's kind of what they're saying still. So now, if we're looking at tags at the beginning, right? who is speaking and kind of how they're speaking is at the very beginning. And after the tag, we put a comma every single time. So you see that right here, and right here. There's a comma, right? And then we put our quotation marks in whatever it is that they say. Okay. And again, now there can be a period because it's the last thing in the sentence. But the very, very last thing is going to be that quotation mark. Okay. So tag at the end. And now here are some examples of the tag at the beginning. Okay. Mom whispered, "Don't wake the baby." I asked, "Can I hold the baby?" She exclaimed, "Of course you can." So we've got the tag in front of what they're saying, right? We're used to seeing it at the end, but we forget that we can actually put it at the beginning as well, okay? And after that tag comes that comma, that punctuation, and then we have the quote of whatever it is the character is saying with regular old punctuation at the end of our sentences. Period, question mark, exclamation point. All right. So you'll have this lesson that you can go back and you can look at. You're also going to have some examples that you're going to copy down into your writer's notebook today. So I'm going to have some pictures of my writer's notebook, and you're going to copy down exactly like I have into your book. That way, right, you can come back to it. You don't have to worry about trying to find this particular Google slide lesson. Okay, so at the end, here are your tasks. You've got 3 things to do today. First of all, you're going to continue working on your draft. We call that your sloppy copy, right? Because it's not your published piece. You're going to make mistakes and cross things off, right? And add things to it and revise and edit. So you're going to continue working on your draft today. You're going to go back and you're going to add some dialogue into your story where appropriate. Okay, use the examples from the slide here and from your writer's notebook that you're going to be writing down. Use the examples to kind of help you. How do we stretch it out? How do we show detail by showing some action and by showing pieces of the setting, right? What's happening in the story. Second thing you're going to do, right, is that as you add that dialogue, you want to mix it up and use tags at the beginning and tags at the end. So try both, okay? Make sure that you also use some interesting words. So don't always use the word said. Okay, have you ever heard said is dead? You can say other things instead of said, like shouted, exclaimed, hollered, right? It depends on what your character's doing. Whispered, right? Whined. Think about different ways to say said and use those. And then finally, you're going to copy the pages from the assignment today into that writer's notebook. And I told you there will be some pictures on Google Classroom for you to copy down into your book. And those are your notes to help you as you write, because you're going to continue writing for the rest of the week. And for part of next week, you're going to go back and you're going to change and add some things. So even if you're finished with your story, there are still things that you can do to make your story better. We're going to talk about transitions. Next week, we're going to talk about using better word choice and strong verbs. So there's a lot of things that we can add to our stories. All right, but your tasks today are to continue working and to add that dialogue.